It was exactly 6:02 a.m. when I pulled up in front of my parents' house in Asheville. The sky was still a deep shade of blue, the sun barely brushing the horizon, and the air had that crisp, almost sacred quiet of early morning. I had double-checked the weather, reprinted our boarding passes, and left the house 15 minutes early, just in case. This trip had been in the making for over 2 years, planned down to every last dinner reservation. Flights to Paris, luxury hotels in Florence, private walking tours in Rome. All of it mine. My treat. A once-in-a-lifetime experience I had poured my soul into. For them. I parked at the curb, smiled to myself, and got out to help with the luggage. That's when I saw her. My younger sister, Sienna, was standing at the door, pulling a sleek lavender suitcase behind her, dressed in athleisure like she was heading to a spa weekend. My mother was beside her, beaming. Too brightly. My heart skipped. I looked from one to the other, trying to keep my voice even. What's going on? Oh, Violet, my mom said, her tone like she was announcing a surprise birthday party. We decided Sienna's going instead of you. The words didn't land immediately. They floated in the morning air. Absurd and incomprehensible. Instead of me? I asked, blinking hard. Mom, this is my trip. She waved a hand like I had pointed out something mildly inconvenient. You're always working so hard. You can take another trip later. Your sister's been stressed. She needs this. My chest tightened. I turned to my dad, but he was looking away, pretending to check his watch. Sienna didn't even bother to fake shame. She smirked, one hand on her hip like this was some kind of power move. Thanks for understanding, sis, she said, her voice dripping with fake gratitude. The pressure behind my ribs was unbearable. I had paid for everything. Every tour, every hotel, every flight upgrade. I had imagined the way their faces would light up when we stood in front of the Eiffel Tower or floated down the Arno River in Florence. I had done it to make them happy, to finally feel like I mattered. And now they were replacing me with her. I should have screamed. I should have cried. I should have dropped the suitcase and walked away. But I didn't. I bit down on the bitterness, rising in my throat, and nodded. Let's get going then. My voice was flat. I turned toward the trunk, popped it open, and loaded in the luggage. Sienna tossed hers in last, humming something under her breath. My mother climbed into the back seat with a satisfied sigh, my father following quietly behind her. As I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, a strange calm washed over me. It wasn't peace. It was the numb, razor-thin calm right before a storm breaks. They thought they could cast me aside and still enjoy the luxury I worked so hard to create. Fine. Let's see how that works out. The car ride to the airport was a symphony of silence, punctuated only by Sienna's nonstop chatter. She leaned forward from the back seat, talking about her outfits, TikToks about Paris, and all the shopping she planned to do. Her voice grated like static, but my hand stayed steady on the wheel. Oh my gosh, Mom. Should I pack the blue dress or the floral one for the Eiffel Tower? She asked, giggling. My mother chuckled, lightly. Bring both, sweetheart. We'll have time to change between stops. They said it so casually. Like I wasn't even in the car. I clenched my jaw and focused on the road ahead. Asheville's early morning streets blurred into one another, but the weight in my chest stayed sharp, anchored to every word they said. At one point, my dad cleared his throat. Thanks again for driving us, Violet. I know this probably feels unusual. I met his eyes briefly in the rearview mirror. Unusual. That's an interesting way to put it. He looked away, lips pressed together, adjusting the seatbelt like it might save him from the discomfort. He didn't say another word. Sienna leaned forward, her perfume wafting toward me. Too sweet, too artificial. You're not mad, right? She cooed. I mean, this is huge for me. I've never been out of the country. I could never afford something like this on my own. You're being really mature about it. I forced a smile so tight it hurt. Of course. Enjoy the trip." She leaned back, satisfied with her own delusion. My fingers curled tighter around the steering wheel, the leather biting into my skin. Every mile felt like a countdown. Not to the flight, but to the moment I would finally let go of this farce. When we pulled up to the airport drop-off zone, I moved on autopilot. I parked, got out, opened the trunk, and began unloading bags. My mother stepped out first, stretching and adjusting her scarf. She walked over and gave me a brief hug, one of those polite, shallow ones you give to distant relatives at funerals. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart," she said. "This means a lot to us." "And to Sienna." I nodded stiffly. "Sure, Mom." Sienna wheeled her suitcase to the curb, beaming like she'd won some kind of prize. "You're the best, Vi. Seriously." I didn't answer. I watched them disappear into the terminal, swallowed by the sliding glass doors and the bustle of the airport lobby. The moment they were out of sight, I walked back to the car and got in, my hands trembling as I shut the door. This wasn't just about a trip. This was years of being the reliable one, the responsible one, the afterthought, the one they assumed would always understand, always adjust, always be okay with giving up. But something shifted that morning, and they wouldn't realize it until it was far too late. I didn't cry on the drive home. I thought I would. I thought the hurt would break through and flood me, but it didn't. Instead, there was this strange, hollow quiet in my chest, the kind that follows a storm. But before the rebuild, I parked in front of my house and sat there for a moment, engine off, hands still on the wheel, staring straight ahead. Then I exhaled, slowly, carefully, like I was releasing something I'd been holding for years. I stepped out of the car, walked inside, and closed the door behind me without turning on the lights. My home was still, dim, and waiting, just like it always did when I came back after giving a piece of myself away to people who never noticed. Not this time. I walked straight to the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and logged into the travel account I had used to book everything. The page loaded slowly. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, and then one by one I started canceling it all. The suite in Paris gone. The luxury room in Florence, with the river view, canceled. The museum passes, the private driver in Rome, the restaurant reservations I'd paid deposits for months in advance. Every last one vanished with a click. The screen flashed with confirmation emails as I worked, each one like a breath of fresh air. I had memorized every detail of that trip. I knew exactly where they'd be trying to check in, and I knew exactly where they'd get turned away. I stared at the inbox filling up with refund notices, the totals tallying like a scorecard of my own quiet rebellion. They wanted her to go instead? Fine, but they wouldn't do it on my dime. I wasn't angry, not in the way I expected. I wasn't screaming or throwing things. I didn't need to. The truth was, I felt lighter than I had in years. It was almost terrifying how good it felt to choose myself. For once, to draw a line, not in the sand, but in stone. When I closed the laptop, I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and smiled, not wide, not triumphant, but deeply. Like I had finally stopped pretending that being the bigger person meant swallowing every insult. They thought I'd take the hit, like always. They had no idea what was coming. The calls started as soon as their flight landed in Paris. I was still in my pajamas, standing at the sink rinsing out my coffee mug, when my phone buzzed once, twice, then erupted into a flurry of vibration that didn't stop for nearly 10 minutes. At first, I ignored it. I walked over to the couch, sipped my coffee slowly, and let the storm build without interruption. Then curiosity got the better of me. I unlocked my phone. 10 missed calls. 5 from my mother. 2 from my dad. 3 from Sienna. A string of texts filled the screen, one after the next, like dominoes falling. "Violet, what's going on? The hotel says our reservation isn't showing up. Did you forget to confirm the booking? Call me now. This isn't funny, Violet. Fix this. Now." I actually laughed, sharp, breathy, unexpected. Fix this? They really thought I was still that version of me, the one who always patched things up, cleaned up their messes, smoothed over their lack of foresight and effort. The next message came with a voicemail. Sienna, of course. Her voice snapped through the speaker before I could hit delete. Violet, this is so petty. You're really going to leave us stranded? We're stuck here because of you. You need to call the hotel and fix this. Like now. I hit delete mid-sentence. I hadn't packed a single bag for this trip. And yet I had all the power. Another call. My mother this time. I let it ring, and ring, and ring, and then, for no other reason than to stop the buzzing, I picked up. Her voice hit me like a slap. Violet, what did you do? The hotel says the reservation was canceled. None of the tours are booked anymore. Why would you? I cut her off, calm as still water. I canceled them. Silence. On the other end, I could hear background noise, muffled voices, airport announcements, Sienna's indignant whining. My mother's voice returned, low and sharp. Why would you do that? I let the sarcasm drip. Oh, I don't know. Maybe because you took my trip and handed it to someone else like it was a spare jacket. Maybe because you decided, without even asking me, that I didn't matter. She tried to speak, but I kept going. You're lucky I even drove you to the airport. Her voice turned defensive. We thought you'd understand. Sienna needed this. I snapped. Understand what? That my time, my money, my effort means nothing? That as long as your precious Sienna gets what she wants. I'm just expected to smile and move out of the way. There was a long pause. For a moment, I thought I heard a flicker of guilt. But then came the hiss. We're family. We don't do this to each other. I laughed bitterly. Funny. I was just thinking the same thing. Then I hung up, just like that, and turned my phone off. The silence that followed was pure, sacred, like stepping out of a burning building and closing the door behind you. Let them figure it out. I was done saving them. The silence didn't last forever, but it lasted long enough. Long enough for me to sit out on my back porch with a warm cup of tea, legs curled under a blanket, and watch the sun stretch across the trees like nothing in the world was broken. Long enough for me to sleep in without guilt, to cook breakfast without rushing, to feel like my life belonged to me again. For 2 whole days, I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder how their flight went. I didn't care what they were eating or where they were staying. For the first time in years, I wasn't tethered to their needs. It was strange. How quiet my house was, but peaceful. That peace broke on the 3rd day when I opened my phone and saw over a dozen voicemails waiting. The first was from my mom, angry. Violet, you've gone too far. Your sister is in tears and your father is furious. We can't get into any of the hotels. Do you have any idea what you've done? The next was Sienna, entitled as ever. You're ruining everything. This is supposed to be our dream trip. You need to call and fix it, like now. And then came my dad. His voice was softer, but it still stung. Violet, I don't know what's going on with you, but this isn't like you. Please call us. We need to sort this out. Sort it out, like I was the one who created the mess. I placed the phone down on the table and wrapped my fingers around the ceramic mug, letting the heat sink into my skin. I didn't reply. I didn't even think about replying. That evening, Harper stopped by, unannounced as always, holding 2 coffees and a raised eyebrow. I heard, she said simply, setting the drinks down and plopping onto my couch like she lived there. Of course you did, I replied, managing a tired smile. She sipped her drink, then looked over at me, her voice quiet but firm. Your mom called me yesterday. Of course she had. My mother had always been good at recruiting allies when guilt didn't work. And what did you say? I asked, bracing myself. Harper shrugged. I told her you were probably busy, and that she should give you space. You know, like she failed to do for the past decade. I let out a laugh. for real this time. A sharp, breathy sound that cracked the heaviness in my chest. "You're the best." "No," she said, her tone softening. "You're the best, because you finally stood up for yourself." Her words stayed with me long after she left. They clung to the corners of my mind as I cleaned up the kitchen, folded laundry, watered the ferns on the porch. They echoed louder than any voicemail. You finally stood up for yourself. It wasn't rage that drove me anymore. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. They had made a choice. And now so had I. No more fixer. No more doormat. No more waiting to be included in a life I was expected to fund but never allowed to fully live. I didn't know what was next. But for the first time, I knew I would be the one to choose it. It took me less than an hour to decide. I hadn't planned to do anything drastic that evening. Maybe just watch something light, read a chapter or two. But then I passed by the small pile of papers on my desk, the neatly organized folder I'd created for the trip. I paused, then sat down, and opened the spreadsheet. There it was, everything I had built, the names of cities, the flight codes, the carefully stacked itinerary, day 1 in Paris, day 2 at the Louvre, day 3 in Florence. But the names didn't sting anymore, because as I looked at those rows and columns, one thought kept rising up like a whisper I could no longer ignore. This was never about them. This was about me. I closed the spreadsheet, opened a new browser window, typed in solo travel ideas for women. 3 hours later, I had a new itinerary. No one else's preferences. No one to accommodate. Just me. I booked a one-way flight to Rome, then a train to Florence. A few days in Cinque Terre. I picked cozy boutique hotels and quiet little ghost houses. I left space in the schedule for rest, for curiosity, for spontaneity. Not because I was lazy, but because I could. 2 weeks later, I boarded the plane alone. I thought I'd be nervous, and I was at first. But the second my feet hit Italian soil, I felt a kind of calm I'd never known before. I wandered cobblestone streets with no destination. I drank espresso in hidden cafes where no one knew my name. I marveled at the ruins, the fountains, the faces around me that weren't expecting anything from me except to exist. One afternoon, I sat on the Spanish Steps watching the crowd drift and swirl like ocean tides. I had a gelato in one hand and my journal in the other. The air smelled like sugar and stone. For years, my dreams had always been laced with obligation. Get the job, make enough, prove I was worth loving, and always include everyone else in the plan. But now, I opened to a clean page and wrote, learn Italian, start a business, travel to 5 more countries, stop apologizing for putting myself first. I underlined the last one 3 times. That night in Florence, I had dinner at a tiny family-run restaurant tucked between 2 bookshops. The candlelight flickered across the wine glass, and the Arno River shimmered in the distance. I didn't miss home. I didn't miss their voices or their guilt trips or their complaints. And for the first time, I didn't miss being needed, because I was enough. Right there, alone at that table, I felt it like a steady pulse. I was finally living my life, not performing it. When I returned home, my suitcase was heavier, not from souvenirs, but from clarity. From all the pieces of myself I had gathered and stitched back together in quiet hotel rooms, on early morning walks, in journals inked with freedom. I placed the bag by the door and looked around my house. It felt different, like it belonged to someone who finally knew how to say no. My phone buzzed just as I was unpacking. A message from Mom. Hope you had a nice trip. Maybe we can all talk soon. No guilt, no command, just a soft nudge. I stared at the screen, then set the phone face down on the table. Not yet. Later that week, another message. Then another. I ignored most of them. But when the phone rang one quiet Thursday afternoon and I saw her name again, I let my thumb hover and answered. "Hi, Violet," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it in years. "How was your trip?" "It was amazing," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I'm glad to hear that." She hesitated. "We've been thinking a lot about what happened. Maybe we handled things poorly." Poorly. I almost laughed, but I didn't. I let the silence hang for a moment before replying. "You replaced me on a trip I planned and paid for, without even asking. Poorly is an understatement." "I know," she said quietly. "Your dad and we didn't realize how much it would hurt you." I didn't respond right away. I didn't trust the calm in her voice. I'd been lured in by it before, guilt-wrapped apologies that led straight back into old habits. "And Sienna?" I asked. "She's upset," Mom admitted. "But I think she knows she could have handled things better too." I leaned against the counter. "This wasn't just about the trip, Mom. It was everything before it. Every holiday shaped around Sienna's whims. Every time you asked me to give, well, she got to take. I'm not doing it anymore." There was a pause, then a sigh. "We're going to try to do better," she said. "We don't want to lose you." Her words tugged at something old in me, something that used to leap at the chance for connection. But I had changed, and now I knew better. "I'm glad to hear that," I said, calm but unmoved. "But it's going to take more than words to fix this. I need to see real effort, not just apologies." "You will," she promised quickly. "We'll give you the space you need. But I hope you'll let us back in someday." After the call, I set the phone down and looked around my kitchen. Nothing had shifted. The sunlight was still warm on the tiles. My tea was still steaming. I still belonged to myself. Maybe they meant it. Maybe they didn't. But either way, it wasn't my job to fix them. Not anymore. The day they returned, I was already there. I didn't go to greet them out of kindness. I went for closure. I parked in their driveway, coffee in hand, and sat on the porch swing like it was my seat at a courtroom. Their taxi pulled in slowly, the trunk popping open with a weary groan. The three of them stepped out, dragging their suitcases behind them like the weight of disappointment had sunk into every wheel. Lauren, Sienna, was the first to speak. "Well, I hope you're happy." I raised an eyebrow, stayed seated. "Happy about what?" "Our trip was a disaster," my mom snapped, waving her hand dismissively like she was swatting at a fly. "We spent the entire week staying in tiny hotels and eating. I don't even know what that food was." "Don't get me started on the tours," Sienna added, folding her arms. "Oh, wait, there weren't any. Do you know how humiliating it is to show up and be told there's no reservation?" I took another sip of coffee and let the complaints wash over me like white noise. "Sounds rough," I said flatly, "but you wanted to take Sienna. I'm sure you all had some great bonding time." "That's not the point," my mother said, her voice rising. "You set us up to fail." I stood up slowly, setting my mug down beside me. "No, Mom, I didn't set you up for anything. I planned a beautiful trip for the three of us, one I worked overtime for, saved for, planned every detail of. You're the ones who chose to cut me out at the last minute." My father finally spoke, his tone quiet but firm. "You didn't have to cancel everything, Violet. That was extreme." "Was it?" I asked, folding my arms. "Why should I have paid for a trip I wasn't invited to? If Sienna needed it so badly, maybe you should have planned one for her. Or better yet, she could have earned it herself." Sienna rolled her eyes. "You're so dramatic. It's just money, Violet." I felt my chest tighten, but this time not with pain, with power. "And you're so entitled," I shot back. "Do you have any idea how much work went into planning that trip? How many nights I gave up rest? How many things I put off so I could make it perfect? But you don't, because for you everything just shows up, because someone else takes care of it." They stared at me, finally quiet. "I've spent years being the responsible one," I continued, my voice calm but unshakable. "The one who fixes things, who plans things, who makes sure everyone's taken care of, and all you've done is take it for granted. My mother opened her mouth to respond, but I raised a hand. No, Mom. What's not fair is how you treated me. You chose her, like always, and now I choose me. I picked up my bag from the porch swing, turned toward my car. I'm glad you're back safely, but don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I'm done. I walked to my car, keys in hand. I heard them calling after me. 3 voices laced with guilt, irritation, desperation, but I didn't look back. The engine roared to life as I pulled out of the driveway, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to cry. I felt free. The drive home from my parents' house felt different this time. No heaviness, no swirling thoughts trying to piece together what I could have said better, how I could have softened the blow. Just silence and peace. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the early evening light was filtering through the trees, casting golden shadows across my porch. I turned off the ignition and sat there for a moment, my hands resting calmly in my lap. They could be angry. They could be embarrassed. They could sit in that kitchen and tell each other how ungrateful I was. It didn't matter anymore. I walked inside and made myself a cup of tea, real tea, loose-leaf jasmine in a ceramic pot I had bought on a whim from a local artist. No instant powder, no rushing, no compromises. Then I sat on my couch, legs tucked beneath me, and let myself feel everything. All at once, the anger, the hurt, the relief, the aching disappointment of years wasted, and the strange exhilaration of finally standing up for the woman I'd buried under yes and okay and sure I'll handle it. My phone was still off. The silence wasn't lonely, it was luxurious. Over the next few days, I did things slowly, intentionally. I repainted my bedroom a soft shade of sage. Threw out the couch my parents had gifted me after they didn't want it anymore, and bought a new one that I actually liked. I rearranged my bookshelves, donated clothes I hadn't worn in years, and replaced the old dinnerware with pieces I picked out for myself. Little things, small shifts, but each one whispered the same message: you belong to you now. I joined a local hiking group. I started journaling every morning. 5 minutes, no filter. I tried a new cafe every Saturday, even if the coffee wasn't great, just to see what else was out there. And I didn't return their calls. Not yet. Not because I was punishing them, but because I was choosing my timing. Because for once, I was choosing something at all. One Sunday afternoon, I sat on my porch and watched the sun dip behind the ridge, casting fire across the sky. The wind was cool, soft. I held a pen in one hand, a notebook in the other, and stared at a blank page, not in fear but in anticipation. I didn't know what came next, but I knew it wouldn't be about earning their approval anymore. It would be about me, the woman who had spent years doing the right thing, the polite thing, the expected thing, was finally doing the real thing, living, and it felt damn good. It was late Tuesday morning when my phone rang again. I stared at the screen for a long second, then picked up. "Hi, Violet," my dad said, his voice lower than usual. "Your mom wanted me to call. She thinks you'll listen to me." I leaned back in my chair, not answering right away. He sighed. "Look, this has gotten out of hand. Your mom's upset. Lauren, Sienna, is furious. And, well, it's just a mess. But you're better than this." That was all it took. That line. That assumption that being better meant being quiet. I sat up straighter. Better than what, Dad? Better than standing up for myself? Better than refusing to be treated like a footnote in my own life? "That's not what I meant," he rushed to say. "It's just, you've always been the reasonable one, the one who holds everything together." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Exactly. That's the problem." He paused. I could hear him breathe, like he was searching for the words that might fix it all. But there weren't any. "You're punishing the whole family over one bad decision. Is that really fair?" "Fair," I repeated, my voice rising. "Let's talk about fair. Was it fair when you and Mom looked me in the eyes and told me the trip I'd spent years saving for was no longer mine? Was it fair when you replaced me with Sienna like I was an optional extra? That's not what we were trying to do. It's what you did, I said flatly. And now you want me to act like it didn't happen. There was silence on the other end. I don't know what you want me to say, he finally whispered. I don't need you to say anything, I replied. I just need you to understand. I'm done being the afterthought. From now on, I come first. Then I ended the call, and this time there was no shaking in my hands, no tightness in my chest, just calm, real, earned calm. Later that evening, I sat on the porch again. A soft breeze rustled the wind chimes, and the sky was painted in gold. I opened my journal and flipped to a new page. Across the top I wrote what I know now, and underneath it I started listing. I am not responsible for keeping the peace. I am not selfish for choosing myself. I am not dramatic for asking to be valued. I am not afraid of being alone. I am no longer willing to be erased to make someone else feel more important. The list went on. It was quiet, simple, true. A week later, Harper called again. So, she asked, what's next for you? I smiled, watching the sun slip below the mountains. I don't know, I said, but for the first time in my life, I get to decide. And that felt like the real trip of a lifetime.